And so I worked with 13.
So you went to deep and dark places.
I went deep in dark places. Absolutely. Because, well, and if you think about the mining industry in Canada, it's so, it's one of our most needed industries. And so the other piece to it is that there's so many dimensions to it that I wanted to see, how does this work? Like, will this work? Right. And, so, to bring us back to, the story that I wanted to share was really looking at, when I first started. And there was this one of the 13, after I had done the initial research, said, come on in. We're launching this radical candor, culture work across our entire company. And, this was their operations are based in Ontario in Canada. Their main mines are in South Africa and I want to say Australia. I think those are the two countries. And so they launched this radical candor. And radical candor, if you are unfamiliar with that, it was Kim Scott. And her research and her work had come out about honest feedback, about how you actually speak with people so that feedback is landing. So, they wanted to measure how well that they were doing. And, what was fascinating was that it actually tanked. And the reason it tanked was because those two countries. So if we look at South America, if we look at South America and Australia, their attrition in South America actually within 3 months saw this massive spike. And it was because in those cultures, public critique, direct feedback in the way that Kim Scott had initially rolled out her book, actually, even if it is constructive in nature, it actually violated core norms about respect, about trust, about how people are allowed to contribute. And so while Canadian leaders, here they were thinking, oh man, we're doing these great things, right? We're going to build psychological safety because 5 years ago, psychological safety, the millions of dollars that were being spent just on that initial training was massive. And yet, in essence, they did psychological harm to that specific region simply because they were eliminating some of the belonging indicators that actually brought people together. And so if you look at DEI and you look at the study that I did 10 years ago that showed that it would polarize, it's because of localization that it polarized. And it was because of, how we looked at concepts that don't necessarily land within the organization. So now, if you look at, what those measurement scores were initially, their South American offices were like 40% less on, psychological safety and well-being than the other offices in the world. So when we look at belonging versus fitting in cultures, we've been socialized to adapt to culture fit, right? We hear about that all the time. And so, but culture fit is very one-sided. It's very much like, it is 100% on you, Robin. If you do not act, say, do, perform, dress, all of these other things, then sorry, Robin, you don't make the cut. You're not allowed. You don't fit. You can't contribute. We're going to make it harder for you to do your best. And so we started looking at all of these things, like what is it that actually unpacks belonging rather than fitting in? Because that was essentially where we started. We already knew fitting in was on the other end of the spectrum of belonging. And so it was like, okay, what does this even mean? And it was incredible and has been incredible the past 5 years to really look at how these indicators can be measured and then how they shrink the gap. And, we're kind of sitting at a 24% gap reduction on belonging, 18% average increase in retention. So we're seeing really positive results within 2 years of just looking at belonging through a scientific and measurable lens.